Hey, can you find me some studies that support the idea that most Americans want to vote for someone that they'd rather have a beer with? I want to further support the idea that Americans don't really vote based on policy and that they mostly vote based on identity and fitting in with a given shared identity. I know we've already looked at work that somewhat shows this, but I need some more.
We've got the core pattern. The literal beer test is more polling pundit shorthand than a clean academic construct. The stronger scholarly argument is warmth, likability, candidate traits, party cues, and identity often structure how policy is interpreted. ES, but I'd word it carefully. I would not claim most Americans literally vote for the person they want to drink with. That is more of a campaign polling shorthand. The stronger, more defensible claim is open quote. American voters often evaluate candidates through perceived warmth, likability, character, party identity, and group belonging, with policy positions frequently filtered through those identity cues rather than assessed independently. Close quote. Here are the sources I found. Hashed best beer test, likability support. 1. Pew Research Center, 2000, Bush's personal qualities trumping Gore's issue advantage. This is probably your best bridge from beer test to academic language. Pew found that, near the end of the 2000 election, Bush's advantage on personal qualities was overtaking Gore's edge on issues. It also says voters often cited issues when explaining support, but personal qualities were the main reason for not supporting a candidate and were central for swing voters. That is perfect for your argument because it shows policy is not absent, but identity personality can become the deciding filter. 2. Gallup, 2000. Who would you rather have dinner with? Gallup did not phrase it as beer in this poll, but it asked a nearly identical social likability question. Which candidate Americans would rather have dinner with? In August 2000, Gore and Bush were almost tied overall on that question, but men preferred Bush 47% to 39%, while women preferred Gore 46% to 37%. Gallup also measured things like humor, public speaking, looks, and intelligence, which shows how presidential candidates were being evaluated through social personality dimensions, not just policy. Best academic studies for candidate personality beats policy more than we admit. 3. Kinder, Peters, Abelson, and Fisk, 1986. Voters think about candidates through personality schemas. This is a strong older Ames-based article. Using open-ended responses from the American National Election Studies from 1952 to 1984, the authors found that voters' cognitive representations of presidential candidates were generally focused more on personality characteristics than on issue concerns or partisan group connections. Tiny source goblin with a lantern. This one is very directly useful. For Lausson and Bohr, 2017, warmth predicts candidate evaluations and vote choice. In Limpis This one is very good for the have a beer with vibe because warmth is basically the polished academic cousin of likability. The authors analyzed Annie's presidential candidate trait data from 1984 to 2008 and ran a survey experiment. They found that warmth-related traits outperformed competence, leadership, and integrity in predicting global candidate evaluations and vote choice. 5. Fridkin and Kenny, 2011. Voters rely heavily on traits even after controlling for policy and ideology. This study examined U.S. Senate campaigns and found that citizens rely heavily on candidate traits when evaluating candidates, even after controlling for party, ideology, and issue preferences. This is excellent because it directly supports the claim that personality identity cues are not just decorative frosting. They remain predictive even when policy variables are included. 6. Todorov et al., 2005. Snap judgments from faces predicted election outcomes. In a Princeton study published in Science, participants judged candidate competence from photos alone. Those judgments predicted 71.6% of U.S. Senate race winners from 2000, 2002, and 2004, and 66.8% of U.S. House winners in 2002 and 2004. That does not prove voters consciously choose based on faces, but it supports the broader point that fast, non-policy impressions can influence electoral outcomes. Best studies for party identity filters policy. 7. Cohen, 2003, Party Over Policy. This is probably the cleanest source for your exact claim. Cohen found that when people knew their party's position on a welfare policy, they often disregarded the policy's actual content and adopted the party position. Even better for your paper, participants believed they were making objective, autonomous judgments while being influenced by group cues. Number 8. Huddy, Mason, and Ara, 2015, Expressive Partisanship. This study develops an expressive model of partisanship using social identity theory. Their partisan identity scale better explained campaign involvement than strong stances on personally important policy issues, ideological self-placement, or ideological identity. This supports your shared identity fitting in argument beautifully. 9. Barber and Pope, 2019, Group Loyalty Can Overpower Ideology. Barber and Pope used actual conservative and liberal policy statements from Donald Trump to separate party loyalty from ideology. They found that low-knowledge respondents, strong Republicans, Trump-approving respondents, and self-described conservatives were most likely to accept Trump's cue, whether the statement was liberal or conservative. The authors conclude that group loyalty was a stronger motivator than ideological principles for many respondents. Number 10. Van Bavel and Pereira, 2018, The Partisan Brain. This is more of a theoretical review than a single experiment, but it is useful for your framework. They argue that partisanship can bias information processing and may even alter memory, implicit evaluation, and perceptual judgments. Their model explicitly helps explain why people may place party loyalty over policy and truth. Best way to phrase it in your paper. You could write, open quote, "The candidate I would rather have a beer with idea should not be treated as a literal theory of voting behavior, but it captures a broader empirical pattern. Voters often evaluate candidates through warmth, personality, and shared identity cues rather than through policy alone. Research on candidate traits shows that voters' impressions of warmth and personal character can predict candidate evaluations and vote choice, even when party, ideology, and issue preferences are considered. Likewise, studies of party cues and expressive partisanship suggest that voters often process policy through group identity, adopting or rejecting positions partly according to whether those positions affirm belonging to a trusted political in-group." Close quote. Tiny caveat, because the Professor Goblin may be lurking in the rubric. Don't say Americans do not vote based on policy. Some newer work pushes back and finds that voters still respond to issue congruence in some contexts. A safer version is, policy matters, but it is often interpreted through identity, personality, and group cues.
Great job. Could you go ahead and generate some APA citations for all of these, including the links to where I can find them? Absolutely. Small correction before Citation Goblin starts typing. Yada. I'll leave this in the YouTube description. Thanks for watching.